I know that by discovering, awarding, celebrating and scaling solutions that repair and regenerate our planet, we can inspire that urgent action.
For years, their tensions simmered quietly behind palace walls. But when Prince William discovered that Camilla's grandson had bullied young Prince George, silence was no longer an option. In a bold, unprecedented move, William revoked the boy's royal title, igniting a storm within the monarchy. Was it justice or something far more personal? Because what came next didn't just divide a family. It threatened to tear apart the very line of succession. And now, the palace can't contain the fallout. The delicate balance of power. King Charles's cancer diagnosis didn't just ripple through the palace. It cracked its very foundation. While the public watched with sympathy and concern, behind the gates of Windsor, something far more profound had already begun. A quiet but urgent reshuffling. Not just of calendars or public duties, but of power. It started in January 2024, when the king sought treatment for an enlarged prostate. Then just weeks later, the shocking February announcement: cancer. What the cameras never captured was a sudden shift behind the scenes. The way corridors at once echoed with deference to Charles now buzzed with new conversations, new authority, and a silent understanding that time might be moving faster than anyone had planned. Prince William, long the heir in waiting, suddenly wasn't just shadowing the throne. He was stepping into its light. Senior officials who once reported only to the king now found themselves briefing William directly. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't strategy. It was survival. The monarchy, without ever saying aloud, had begun to prepare for the unthinkable. For Queen Camilla, the change came like a chill under the velvet. Her role, rooted in ceremony and tradition, was always tied to Charles's reign. But now, each time William's voice replaced the king's in key discussions, each private meeting she wasn't invited to, it became painfully clear. Influence, once so carefully won, was quietly slipping through her fingers. Of course, nothing seemed to miss on the surface. That's how the palace survives. Through grace, through smiles, through the illusion of control. But those who know where to look saw the signs. William at the head of briefings. Camilla absent from key consults. Memos that once came from Clarence House, now echoing from Kensington. And beneath it all, emotion. This wasn't just about roles and titles. It was about loyalty, about legacy, about a son balancing grief with duty, and a stepmother trying to protect the life she had fought to be accepted into. William respected Camilla, but his vision was clear: a leaner monarchy, more focused, more future-facing. Less shadow, more crown. These were not disagreements. They were opposing blueprints for the soul of the monarchy. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tension bled into the public eye. But what neither William nor Camilla foresaw was just how fast that quiet power struggle would break the surface. And once it did, there would be no hiding what the monarchy had tried so desperately to keep behind closed doors. The Duchess of Cornwall's strategic ascent. To truly grasp the storm now brewing inside the palace, you first need to understand just how extraordinary Camilla's rise has been. Hers is not just a tale of scandal and survival. It's one of the most remarkable image transformations in modern royal history. From the most vilified woman in Britain after Diana's death to queen consort, crowned beside her beloved Charles. But this wasn't time healing wounds. This was strategy, measured, relentless, and astonishingly effective. When she married Charles in 2005, the public expected Camilla to fade quietly into the background. She was given the title Duchess of Cornwall, not Princess of Wales, a choice drenched in silent respect for Diana's memory. But what few realized then was that Camilla wasn't simply trying to survive within the royal system. She was slowly reshaping it. Almost invisibly, the integration of her own family began. Her son, Tom Parker Bowles, once a peripheral public figure, started appearing more regularly at royal events. Her daughter Laura was spotted at gatherings typically reserved for the inner circle. And then came the children, her grandchildren, seamlessly woven into key moments of royal life. Little Eliza, for instance, standing as a bridesmaid at William and Kate's 2011 wedding, a soft, deliberate move that stitched her family into the Windsor tapestry. This wasn't coincidence. It was careful choreography. By the time Charles ascended the throne, Camilla's world had been stitched so tightly into the royal fabric that her family no longer felt like outsiders. They were part of the furniture, present, accepted, even cherished. But Camilla's real power didn't lie in titles or photo ops. It was in her quiet mastery of court life. Over the years, she built a web of loyalty: courtiers, aides, senior officials. People began to see her not just as Charles's wife, but as a crucial pillar in the royal structure. Behind the scenes, she became indispensable. Smooth with paperwork, shrewd in diplomacy, warm when needed, cold when it counted. And then came the coronation, a crown placed on her head, not in protest, but in applause. The moment she had once thought impossible had become undeniable. Camilla had arrived, not as a supporting figure, but as a royal force in her own right. But here's where the story turns. What Camilla perhaps never foresaw was that her success would place her directly in the path of someone whose authority couldn't be softened by charm or navigated through bureaucracy. Because the man quietly preparing to wear the crown, her stepson, Prince William, wasn't just the future of the monarchy. He was becoming its present. And what happened next would expose tensions neither side could keep hidden much longer. The quiet revolution in royal decision-making. While the public's attention lingered on glittering ceremonies and carefully staged smiles, something far more consequential was quietly unfolding behind palace walls. A transfer of power that would reshape the very heart of the monarchy. And at the center of it all was Prince William. No longer just a patient heir. No longer simply the dutiful son. Something had changed, and those who knew him best began to realize the future king was already starting to rule. The first real crack in the old order came not with fanfare, but through a single financial decision. One that barely made headlines, but sent shockwaves through palace corridors. Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliot, had for years received substantial payments from the Duchy of Cornwall, thanks in part to her influence with Camilla and her role in royal interior design. But under William's watch, that long-standing arrangement was quietly severed. There was no statement, no justification, just a subtle shift in the payment structure, discovered only through meticulous financial reporting. But the message was unmistakable. William wasn't here to rubber stamp old loyalties. He was here to redefine them. And what made this move so powerful wasn't just what it changed, but how it was done. Silently, decisively, without consultation, without compromise. It signaled a new style of royal leadership, one less concerned with tradition or appeasement, and more focused on control, on clarity, on bloodline. Inside the palace, the ripple effects came fast. Camilla, once woven into nearly every layer of court activity, began to notice shifts. Fewer calls, shorter updates, key decisions made without her input, meetings she once attended out of protocol, now proceeded without her name on the list. These weren't emotional outbursts or grand declarations. They were cold, administrative recalibrations. But to those watching, they spoke volumes. William wasn't dismantling Camilla's role all at once. He was instead replacing her influence brick by brick with his own. And at the center of this shift was a defining principle: bloodline. Insiders noticed a quiet prioritization of the direct heirs, William, Catherine, and their children, over extended family. Initiatives focused squarely on the future monarch's line began taking center stage, while the orbit around Camilla slowly dimmed. Even ceremonial roles, once set in stone, were beginning to feel different. The order of precedence, the invitations, the way press releases were worded, all just slightly different, not enough to spark scandal, but enough for those with sharp eyes and long memories to realize that the monarchy wasn't waiting for the future. It had already started living in it. But what no one inside the palace could have foreseen was how these quiet power plays would soon be dragged into daylight by a personal crisis so raw, so emotional. It would force the entire royal family to confront the very cracks they had tried to keep hidden: Kate's battle and the protective instinct. The year 2024 was supposed to be about quiet strength for the Wales family, a time to pause, to heal, to protect what truly mattered. But instead, it became a fault line, a year that split the royal family open in ways no one could hide. It began in January, when Catherine, Princess of Wales, underwent major abdominal surgery. At first, the palace offered reassurance. Recovery was going well. She would return when ready. But just as the nation began to exhale, March brought the blow no one saw coming: a cancer diagnosis. It was a moment that called for compassion, privacy, and unity. But inside the palace, something altogether different was happening. Whispers emerged, then reports, and then quiet fury. Queen Camilla, it was said, had privately urged Kate to resume her duties sooner than advised. The argument, with both Kate and Charles out of action, the burden on the remaining senior royals had become unsustainable. But for William and Kate, it wasn't just a bad suggestion. It was a line crossed. The conversation that followed revealed far more than a scheduling disagreement. It exposed two irreconcilable visions of what royal duty means. Camilla, who had spent decades clawing her way toward acceptance, saw duty as sacred, something that must be fulfilled no matter the cost. Illness, grief, scandal, you show up. That was her creed. But for Kate, the crown came second. Family came first. And for William, there was no debate. Those close to him say his response to Camilla was unlike anything they'd seen before. No diplomatic phrasing, no palace buffer, just one clear, firm message. Catherine's recovery would follow the advice of doctors and the needs of their children, not royal diaries. This wasn't just a husband defending his wife. This was a future king drawing a line in the sand. It marked a turning point. William wasn't playing the long game anymore. He wasn't waiting his turn. In that moment, he showed exactly what kind of monarch he intends to be, one who will not sacrifice those he loves for the sake of tradition, and that, perhaps more than anything else, revealed the true divide. Camilla's vision of royalty had been forged in fire, built from decades of scandal, exile, and eventual acceptance. Every engagement she fulfilled was proof she belonged. William's vision came from legacy, from birthright, from a quiet confidence that the crown was already his, and that protecting his family wasn't a threat to the institution. It was its only path forward. The public, when they learned of it, rallied behind William and Kate. They saw not rebellion, but principle, not weakness, but strength. Yet behind palace doors, the fallout was swift. Tensions hardened. Lines were drawn. And what had once been quiet disapproval was quickly becoming a full-blown power divide. Because this time, it wasn't just about Kate. The next battle would strike even closer to the crown, one that would force William to confront not only Camilla's influence, but the very legacy of his father's reign. And what he did next would change everything. The next generation power play. In any monarchy, the future doesn't lie in tradition. It lives in its children. And for the House of Windsor, that future has a name: Prince George. As the direct heir after William, George isn't just a little boy growing up under palace roofs. He is the embodiment of continuity, of legacy, of the crown's very survival. His younger siblings, Charlotte and Louis, may never wear the crown, but their presence is no less essential. They complete the picture. They anchor the next generation, and they become the quiet heart of a family caught in a gathering storm. But not everyone sees them simply as children. Inside the palace, a quiet, calculated campaign had been unfolding, one that went largely unnoticed by the public. At its center were Camilla's grandchildren, Eliza Lopez and Lola Parker Bowles. Technically not royals, no bloodline to the throne, but increasingly present in photographs, in ceremonies, in moments that shaped the royal image. Eliza, in particular, had been placed carefully, subtly. She was a bridesmaid at William and Kate's wedding. A sweet gesture, or so it seemed. Later, she was seen at Charles's coronation, sharing the stage with true heirs, her presence legitimized by proximity. At private family events, she played beside George, Charlotte, and Louis, the cameras capturing what looked like genuine bonds: friendship, unity, innocence. But William and Kate saw more. They saw patterns, repetition, a strategy. Over time, unease began to grow. These weren't just family moments. They were being shaped into narratives. Narratives where Camilla's grandchildren, without royal blood, were gently being folded into the royal future. And to William and Kate, who had spent years fiercely guarding their children's space. That was unacceptable. The final crack came at what was supposed to be a peaceful family gathering, an off-camera moment of togetherness. But behind the scenes, it turned into something else entirely. Witnesses recall an incident, a remark. One of Camilla's grandchildren said something to Charlotte, something cutting, something cruel, not childhood teasing, not playful mischief, but words that stung, words meant to wound. And that was it. William didn't pause. He didn't compromise. He didn't hold a quiet meeting behind closed doors. He made a decision, swift, final, and unmistakable. From that moment forward, Camilla's grandchildren would no longer be part of private family gatherings with George, Charlotte, or Louis. No share holidays. No unofficial portraits. No place in the background of royal life. Because this wasn't just about one incident. It was about what it meant to be royal, and what line should never be crossed. William had drawn those lines in stone. The message was clear. Titles are earned through duty and blood, not borrowed through marriage or managed by proximity. And above all, his children's safety, emotional and otherwise, was not a negotiation. The decision hit the palace like a thunderclap. Inside, loyalties fractured. Camilla, reportedly devastated, found herself suddenly locked out of the most private corners of the Wales household. The once fragile unity between the new queen and the future king had cracked. But for the public, there was no debate. William's fierce protectiveness touched something deeply relatable, especially for mothers and grandmothers watching from afar. He wasn't just guarding a title. He was protecting a little girl's heart. Still, within those palace walls, a new crisis was already stirring, because what had started as a quiet shift in influence had become something much more dangerous. A cold war for the soul of the monarchy, and what would expose next, no one was ready to face. The breaking point behind closed doors. Royal conflict usually hides behind polite smiles, but William's fierce move to shield his children tore that veil away. For Queen Camilla, the ban on her grandchildren wasn't a social slight. It was a betrayal that threatened the legacy she spent 2 decades clawing toward. Heartbroken yet furious, she confronted Charles and William, insisting that one childish remark couldn't justify exile. William, speaking only as a father, refused to bend. Charlotte's trust mattered more than protocol, and no apology could undo the hurt. Charles's silence that day echoed louder than any decree. By saying nothing, the king acknowledged a quiet transfer of power. William had become the guardian of the monarchy's future. Courtiers drifted toward Kensington, whispers of a rift masking a deeper truth. Influence was already shifting to the next generation. William's stand wasn't about staging drama. It was about redefining royal strength. He chose protection over ceremony, principle over peace, and the public cheered. Parents everywhere saw their own instincts mirrored in a prince who put family first. In that instant, something fundamental changed. The crown's future would no longer rest on tradition alone. It would rest on values, the court of public opinion. In today's monarchy, tradition may set the foundation, but public approval builds the walls. And when word of the royal family's internal struggle began to leak beyond the palace gates, it didn't spark scandal. It sparked something far more powerful: alignment. Social media ignited, but not with chaos or cynicism, with unity. Hashtags like #ProtectCharlotte and #StandWithWilliam trended across platforms, fueled not by idle gossip, but by real, heartfelt emotion. People weren't just reacting, they were connecting. Parents, grandparents, everyday Britons who saw their own lives mirrored in the quiet courage of a father putting his child first. It wasn't noise. It was a national mood. This wasn't about choosing sides in palace feud. It was about values. The public understood Camilla's long climb to acceptance, and many had come to respect her resilience. But there were limits. The inclusion of her grandchildren in royal circles, without title, without service, without blood, felt different. It touched a nerve. And William's decision to draw that line resonated far beyond Buckingham's walls. On call-in shows, parents shared their own stories of stepping in when their children were mistreated, no matter the cost. Radio hosts and columnists praised William not for his royal decorum, but for his human instincts. He hadn't played politics. who acted from principle, and that, especially in a world full of posturing, was refreshing. Even the media, often wary of taking strong stances in royal matters, took a definitive tone. Commentators asked questions the public had long wondered. Why were Camilla's family members being given access and privilege they hadn't earned? Why were unofficial figures appearing in official moments? The criticism wasn't cruel. It was rational, measured, and it made one truth impossible to ignore. Authenticity now mattered more than hierarchy. Across the Atlantic, coverage was just as striking. American and Commonwealth outlets praised William's leadership style: decisive, emotionally intelligent, unafraid of confrontation when it served a moral purpose. They cast him not as a future king trapped by protocol, but as a man reshaping monarchy for a new era. The contrast with past generations was clear and welcome, because what the world saw wasn't conflict. It was a character. And most astonishing of all, William hadn't lost standing in this moment of crisis. He had gained it. His silence had spoken when needed. His action had landed without fanfare. And the British people, so often distant from palace affairs, saw in him something rare, a leader who understood what mattered, not just legacy, but love, not just duty, but decency. But beneath the public applause and media approval, something deeper was shifting. The monarchy was recalibrating, not through decrees or declarations, but through actions, instincts, and quiet redefinitions of power. And what came next would not just define William's reign. It would rewrite the future of the royal family itself. The future crown's new direction. What began as a quiet family dispute, centered on childhood behavior and parental instincts, has now revealed itself as something far more profound, a glimpse into the future reign of King William V. This wasn't just a skirmish between a stepmother and a stepson. It was a defining moment that laid bare the principles William intends to carry into his kingship. His decisions in this crisis didn't just resolve immediate tensions. They established a new royal doctrine, one that will shape the monarchy for generations. First, William made clear that bloodline matters, not out of exclusion or elitism, but to preserve the integrity and continuity of the crown. Extended relatives, no matter how beloved, will no longer ride on the coattails of proximity. Privilege must now be earned through service, loyalty, and alignment with the monarchy's evolving purpose. Second, William placed family well-being above tradition. In a monarchy once defined by duty at all costs, he introduced something radical: compassion. His fierce defense of Princess Charlotte wasn't a PR move. It was personal. It was paternal. And it set a precedent that the royal family's most vulnerable, its children, will be protected, not politicized. Third, he led with directness, not diplomacy. Where past royals may have relied on whispered negotiations and behind-the-scenes compromise, William chose clarity, confrontation when needed, boundaries when warranted, and silence only when it spoke louder than words. These aren't stylistic flourishes. They're seismic shifts in how power will be wielded. Inside the palace, the ripple effects have already begun. Discussions about streamlining the royal family, long whispered in cautious tones, have accelerated, not merely to cut costs or modernize appearances, but to focus, to distill the institution down to its core: service, duty, and legacy. For Queen Camilla, the implications are undeniable. Her reign beside Charles remained secure, but her long-crafted influence, particularly through the integration of her extended family, has been checked. Not quietly, not diplomatically, decisively, and that recalibration will echo throughout her legacy. For Catherine and the Wales children, the message has been even clearer. You are the heart of the future monarchy. You will be protected, respected, centered, not sidelined. William's actions have given them a rare gift in royal life: the space to grow into their roles from a position of emotional strength. And for King Charles, the silence he kept during this family fracture said more than words ever could. By stepping back, he allowed the transition to begin, not just in practice, but in spirit, because the truth is undeniable. The next reign has already started. It's visible in the decisions being made, in the power being exercised, in the values now guiding the institution. This isn't just succession. its transformation. But one question remains, hovering over Buckingham Palace like a silent bell, waiting to ring. Can this reimagined monarchy, with its sharper focus, stronger boundaries, and deeper emotional clarity, weather the storm still to come? Because while William has earned the public's respect, and while his children now walk a path more protected than ever before, the crown is heavy, and the true test of this modern monarchy is yet to begin. The quiet revolution's legacy. What we've just witnessed isn't a petty family squabble spiraling out of control. It's a quiet unveiling of a new royal order, a redefinition of leadership, shaped not by titles or tradition, but by principle, by character, by a father's unwavering protection of his children. Prince William's response to this crisis hasn't just reaffirmed his role as heir, it has revealed the monarch he is already becoming. One who blends the dignity of the crown with the compassion of modern parenthood. One who respects the weight of legacy, but isn't afraid to challenge the old rules to build something stronger for the future. In many ways, the transformation unfolding inside the palace mirrors a transformation taking place in Britain itself. People today no longer want distant figureheads shrouded in silence. They want leaders who are real, who feel, who protect, who stand up when it counts. And William, in choosing his daughter's well-being over palace protocol, has shown the kind of strength that resonates far beyond royal gates. As for Queen Camilla, her story remains one of triumph and tension, of a woman who rebuilt her public image through patience and strategy, only to discover that legacy is no longer guaranteed by proximity. Influence now flows through alignment with the values of next king, not the triumphs of the past. The rules have changed. Moving forward, every member of the extended royal family will face new expectations. Behave with dignity, serve with purpose, and understand that inclusion is no longer inherited, it's earned. The blurred lines between insider and outsider are becoming clear, and that clarity will prevent future storms from turning into a full-blown crisis. Most importantly, this moment has shown that the transition to King William V is already underway. The monarchy isn't waiting for a formal coronation to evolve. It's evolving now. With every boundary drawn, every decision made, and every message sent by a man who isn't just preparing to wear the crown, he's already shaping it. And far from weakening the monarchy, this quiet revolution may be its saving grace. A house of Windsor that stands not just on tradition, but on trust, on transparency, on the timeless strength of a family that protects its own. Because in the end, this isn't just about royals. It's about who we trust to lead us into the future, and the values we expect them to live by. So now I ask you, what do you think of Prince William's protective stance? Is he building a monarchy fit for the 21st century, or risking further family division? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and truly appreciate your thoughtful perspectives on the royal family's evolution. And if this behind-the-scenes look at palace power plays fascinated you, don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive. And before you go, tap the video now appearing on your screen. It reveals even more royal secrets the palace hopes you'll never hear. Thanks for watching, and long live the future.